The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, I now call this meeting of the City Council to order. Please note that pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspended certain provisions of open meeting law in the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, as well as Mayor Curtatoni's declaration of emergency dated March 15, 2020. This meeting of the City Council will be conducted via remote participation. We'll post an audio recording, audio-video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local cable access and government channels. Now please rise for the prayer and pledge of allegiance.
Mr. President, let's begin this meeting with a prayer. God, grant this City Council the serenity to accept the things that cannot be changed, the courage to change the things that can be changed, and the wisdom to know the difference. And now let's join in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
This is roll call. Councilor Niedergang.
Here.
Councilor White.
Here.
Councilor Ballantyne. Councilor Ballantyne. I don't record Councilor Ballantyne as being present. Councilor Ewan Campen.
Here.
Councilor Davis.
Here.
Councilor Strezzo.
Present.
Councilor Klingon.
Present.
Councilor Mba.
Present.
Councilor Scott.
Present.
Councilor Rossetti.
Present.
And Councilor McLaughlin.
Here.
Mr. President, 10 councilors are present, 1 is absent. We have a quorum.
Please let the record note too that Councilor Ballantyne is dealing with a personal family issue, so that is why she's not in attendance today. Do we have any moments of silence? Councilor Niedergang.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like us to remember tonight Maria Di Fabrizio. She died on March 27th at the age of 83. Her husband, Antonio, passed away in 2012. She is the mother of Robert, of Maria Farias, and of Anthony. And she has several grandchildren, one of whom, Zayla, lives here along with Maria. And as the mom, Maria, who passed away, they live here on Conwell Street. They're actually next door neighbors of mine. And so I've known Maria for 23 years since we moved here. She was a neighbor and we communicated about neighborly things. We always had a good relationship. We were not particularly close, but this is one of the things about living in Somerville. You get to know people who live right next door to you. Her house is probably 10 feet from mine. And you deal with the stuff that neighbors have to deal with, and you develop a relationship. And I treasure that relationship, and I'm sorry to see her go. And I hope that we will keep her in our hearts and minds. Thank you.
All right, do we have any other moments of silence? If not, please rise for a moment of silence. Please be seated. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, item number 3 is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of March 11th.
This item will be laid on the table for approval. And before we move forward, are there a number of items people have wished to take out of order? Councilor Klingon would like to take item number 618, which is a resolution regarding air pollution on I-93. Councilor Rossetti would like to take item 103 out of order, which is police staff appointments. The city has requested to take items 32, 33, and 34 out of order. So Councilor McLaughlin requests to take these out of order. These are all financial items. And then we're going to take item number 27 out of order, which is the Legislative Matters Committee report, as well as item 14, which is associated with that. Are there any other councilors who wish to take items out of order? And I should also note too, because we've had this conversation a few times, I try to take up any item that city staff or city residents might be available for or here for. So if any councilors have items they would like to take out of order, you can tell me now or tell me prior to the meeting. Seeing no further requests, let's move to the next item, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, item number 4 is a public hearing on a grand location application submitted by TC Systems, which seeks to install 112 feet of conduit on Glen Street from a utility pole to an existing Comcast manhole near the intersection of Pearl and Glen Streets.
I now declare this public hearing open. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on the item? Please use the little hand icon. And I see Haley. I'm going to unmute you, Haley Walker.
Yes, good evening. I'm here with Adam Heller and Tom Agreste here to speak about this item. If you have any questions regarding this project, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak on this item? Please use the little hand icon. Going once, going twice. All right, seeing no further comment, I now declare this public hearing closed. Do we have any comments from the council? This is my ward, and I have no questions, so here are no objections. This item is laid on the table for approval.
Mr. President, that moves us up to item number 18 then, which is a resolution submitted by Councilor McLaughlin and Councilor Klingon requesting federal funds for ultrafine particle mitigation.
All right, so I'm sure everyone here is very well aware of continued fight to get sound barriers along I-93 and retrofit the homes with air filtration systems. Anything we can do to get the fine particle pollution issue addressed in Somerville. And fortunately, I was approached by a number of community activists who are trying to get just that and have now want to appeal to the federal government for money. And there are a couple of residents, I hope they're here in the audience. I see Ellen Reisner and Kanan as well. I would like to, Councilor Klingon would like to sponsor these speakers. Does anyone have any objection? I see Councilor Struzzo would like to sign on. And with no objection, I'm going to unmute you, Ellen. And I'm going to unmute you, Kanan. And you have the floor. While we wait, Councilor Davis would like to sign on as well. Are either of you in the audience? You're muted on my side. You might have to unmute yourself. There you go, Ellen.
Okay, do you want me to speak now?
Sure.
Okay. My name's Ellen Reisner, and I live at 51 Mount Vernon Street in East Somerville, and I'm the president of the Somerville Transportation Equity Partnership. I want to thank Councilor McLaughlin and Councilor Klingon for their efforts to secure federal funding that could begin to address some of the long-term environmental health needs of Somerville residents living alongside I-93 and McGrath Highway, both environmental justice neighborhoods housing predominantly racial and ethnic low-income residents. Since 2006, STEP has participated in research with environmental engineering and public health faculty from Tufts, BU, Harvard, UConn, and Olin College to better understand traffic pollution and the effects of traffic pollution and noise on near highway residents' health in Somerville. Our research has documented that living close to heavily trafficked roadways exposes residents to higher incidence of cardiac and lung disease and death. And there are other studies conducted around the world that have identified other problems that associated to health that we have not researched in Somerville. The impact for the city, if it can secure the $5 million to address the problem, is really profound and very exciting. It would provide the money needed by the Somerville Housing Authority to install triple glazed windows in the state side of the Mystic housing development, which would both reduce noise and traffic pollution. This funding would also pay for portable air filtration for 1,000 residents of double and triple decker apartments near highways, as well as allocating funds to build a prototype sound barrier between the States Avenue neighborhood and I-93 that would reduce those residents' exposure to both traffic pollution and noise. The grant, the funding proposal also includes 1,000 portable filters for residents of East Boston who suffer similarly to us in Somerville because of their proximity to Logan Airport. The science has made it clear that we have an environmental health problem, but the lack of funding has prevented the city from addressing these unhealthy environmental problems. And I cannot tell you how, it's so hard for me to express how much it means to me to have the opportunity to take these actions that could potentially improve the health of many Somerville residents and neighbors. I'm just profoundly grateful that you're moving on this, and I appreciate the time to say this.
All right, thank you for coming. And Kanan, I have you unmuted on my side. It doesn't look like, it looks like you might still be muted. Can you speak? Well, unfortunately, I don't think so, but I would like to thank, oh, there we go. You're live. Kanan, you there? All right, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we can hear from Kanan, but I'd like to thank him. I'd also like to thank Myra Axner for bringing this to our attention. The moment they called me about this, I jumped right on top of it because it's a great opportunity. And thank you for helping us with this. I see, let's see, Councilors Niedergang, Strezzo, Davis, let's say the entire council wants to sign on to this. And Councilor Bao wanted to comment.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to thank you for putting this forward with Councilor Klingon. I appreciate your commitment to environmental justice, and I'm proud to have volunteered, on the research that resulted to this resolution. So I just want to say thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilor Klingon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, I would just like to thank the advocates in the community, Ms. Reisner, Kanan, and so on, and you for bringing it to my attention. As you know, this has been something that I've been working towards for many years, and I think this presents hopefully a good opportunity for us to finally get some safety measures in place to protect the residents along the highway, which was foisted upon this city many years ago. And I do have in my possession, I got a copy of the letter that I asked Civil Housing Authority to send to Congresswoman Presley's office and the proper authorities. And so I am happy that everybody has just jumped at the opportunity to hopefully make a difference in our air quality in this area and the city at large. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? There are none. This item is laid on the table for approval, and let's send a copy to the congressional delegation, Mr. Clerk.
Will do, Mr. President. That moves us to item 103, which is an order submitted by Councilor Rossetti that 7 items that are currently in the Committee on Confirmation of Appointments and Personnel Matters, all related to police officer appointments, be discharged from that committee.
All right, I have a personal conflict of interest that prohibits me from engaging in this conversation, so I'm going to turn it over to Vice President Rossetti. And please, someone call me when we're done. You're muted.
I am muted. I am no longer muted. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Mr. Clerk, for reading this item. Colleagues, I am asking to discharge these items out of Confirmation of Appointments and Personnel Committee. They are 7 individuals who currently have been vetted by this committee and are now sitting on the reserve list. I had a Zoom conference call today with city staff explaining to me that since 2015, we have been approving these types of individuals to become police officers so that the process of signing up for the academy can be a more smoother one. the intent was after the initial committee meeting where we approved these 7 individuals, one has been on the reserve list for close to 2 years now, that once they completed the academy, they would come back before us for this, for the pinning. But the pinning actually will not take place until after the completion of the academy. I wish to discharge these items for committee so that we can approve them as police officers, and so that my colleagues will understand what that will mean is in title only. The academy looks upon individuals from communities who have been approved as police officers. As far as for the city of Somerville, with these 7 individuals, they will not receive compensation or benefits until such times as the first day of beginning the police academy. It's hoped that they will be able to get into the academy scheduled for June in Lowell. There was an academy scheduled in May in Reading or North Reading, I believe, but they were not able to make that deadline date. So by our discharging these items and then my recommending approval, if approved, the police department will then, with the HR department, be able to do the necessary paperwork to enroll them in the police academy. I will remind my colleagues that one of these individuals, Kevin Enriquez, has already on his own paid for and completed the police academy in Lowell, so that he will actually be pinned soon and be able to begin working as a paid employee with the police department. The other 6 individuals will not until full completion and satisfactory completion of the police academy. So I just wanted my colleagues to understand that. So I now move to discharge those 7 items, 211, 483, 211, 484, 485, 486, 487, 488, and 489. I move to discharge those items from the confirmation of appointments and personnel committee member matters. On the motion to discharge, any discussion? Hearing none. Councilor Scott, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam President at the moment. I know our procedure has changed as a city several times. Upon appointment to the position of full police officer, how is it that they would not then begin their employment with the city of Somerville and be receiving compensation and accruing pension time?
I had that discussion. We do have, I believe, present with us this evening, Deputy Director Collins of the HR department, as well as Deputy Chief Stanford, because I asked that question. It was my opinion that if we approved them, they would begin compensation, and I wasn't comfortable, and no disrespect to these 7 individuals, I was not comfortable having them receive any compensation until they've satisfactorily completed the academy. So I see Deputy Chief Stanford has appeared on the screen. If you want to repeat, Deputy Chief, for my colleague, Councilor Scott, and the full board, what you had told me today, this afternoon on our conference call, that they will not begin any type of compensation until day 1 of the academy. Is that true, Deputy Chief Stanford?
Through the chair, that is accurate, ma'am. On the first day of the academy, that is when they'll begin to draw salary and benefits. That's how we've done it. I know the fire department does a little differently. They do an in-service prior to. We do not. We begin paying them and they begin working.
Okay, I guess Madam President, through you, I guess if Deputy Director Collins is here or Ms. Gill, Director Gill is here, I guess I just want to understand how that works with Massachusetts general law of somebody being a sworn officer and not being eligible for pay or pension accrual time.
Deputy Director Collins, could you please respond? You're muted. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, through the chair. So the confirmation of the appointment to permanent police officer allows us to then put forward the candidates to be enrolled in the academy, but we would have it clear to the state that the day of hire would be that first date of the academy.
Oh, okay. All right. So their start date with the city is listed, even though they are, we confirm them, they do not actually receive their commission until the first day of the academy. Okay. I appreciate that. And I guess, Madam President, I would just have one other question. You know, a change was made to not swear these officers until after they had completed the academy previously, because we lost about half a class, as I'm off the top of my head. So I'm curious as to why the change back here when we did go through an entire class. I believe we didn't do that.
Councilor Scott, I asked that question this afternoon, and I was informed that since 2015, this has been the process by the council of approving the individuals so that the police academy process can happen smoother. Some were, I asked for the dates of when we had done that versus the attendance of the academy, and Ms. Schneider-Collins couldn't give me the exact dates right then, but I see Deputy Chief Stanford might want to respond to that. Deputy Chief, did you raise your hand?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Through the chair, I think we're talking about two different issues here. When we speak of swearing them in, that is accurate. That has changed. What hasn't changed and what is consistent and has gone since I was first brought into the academy is we go through the council for confirmation. They are hired. They go to the academy. What changed was the swearing in. So the John Long, I believe, at the last academy, went to the academy, the clerk, and actually swore them in at the same time in which they received their police powers on the date of the graduation from the academy. But that is not to be confused with the confirmation of the committee.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, both the Deputy Chief and Deputy Director, and thank you for allowing me to just ask the question. I'm all set at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I apologize to my colleagues. This process wasn't the best. I should have discharged these items for that discussion, but I didn't. So we are still under the motion to discharge the items from committee. Any further question on discharging these items? Hearing none, I would ask the clerk to call the roll on discharging these items out of committee.
This is a roll call vote on discharging the 7 items, the 7 appointments that you see before you of police officers. On discharging those 7 items, Councilor Niedergang.
Yes.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne. Councilor Ewan-Campen.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo.
Yes.
Councilor Klingon.
Yes.
Councilor Mba.
Yes.
Councilor Scott.
Yes.
Councilor Rossetti.
Yes.
And Councilor McLaughlin. Madam President, 9 councilors are present, 2 are absent. That motion has been approved. Those 7 items are now before this council.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. So, colleagues, I now move to approve the request of the confirmation of the appointment of these 7 individuals to the position of police officer. To remind you all, these will be the final 7 reserve police recruits sitting in our reserve list. If these are approved this evening, that clears the reserve list, and there will be no more outstanding individuals on the current reserve list. I see that Councilor Niedergang has a comment to make. Councilor Niedergang, you have the floor. Excuse me, I just wanted, did I move the motion, Mr. Clerk? Have I moved the motion to accept the request of confirmation of these 7?
Why don't you make it fresh? I can't recall if you actually
Okay, I
expressed
can't
the
recall
words
either.
or not.
Okay, so I will move to accept the request of the confirmation of the appointment of the 7 aforementioned individuals as noted on our agenda. On the motion, Councilor Needigang.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll be voting in favor, and I just want to briefly explain why. I did watch the meetings of your committee, and I noted that 2 members of the committee voted against them. And I would say that I respect and understand any counselor voting against police appointments at this time, given that we are in the process of reimagining policing. So I can understand why counselors would vote against any new police officers being hired. I look at it somewhat differently. I had tried to cut the police budget so that we could not hire 6 additional officers last year, and ultimately that failed. But and I do not want to hire those 6 additional officers, but these are all replacements for retirements. Every year, there are anywhere between a half a dozen and a dozen police officers in the Somerville Police Department that retire. This council and I have not moved or voted to cut the number of officers in the police department up till now. Perhaps that's coming in the future, but up till now we haven't. So to me, it's consistent with our actions in the past, reasonable to allow officers that are retiring, that have retired, to be replaced with new officers. So I look at these as replacements for retirees, and therefore I will be voting in support. Thank you.
Sir, I just wanted to remind the public that during budget discussions last year, Councilor Needigang did put forth a few different motions as it relates to the police department and their budget. But what did pass when we approved the budget was the fact that we did reduce, I believe it was 6 patrol positions down to only a 1-month salary, meaning if the department wanted to attempt to fill those 6 positions that we reduced to a 1-month salary, they couldn't begin employment until June 1st. And again, to remind everybody, these 7 names before us currently sit on our reserve list to fill the retirements that have already occurred. So those 6 patrolmen officers that we reduced to a 1-month salary for this current fiscal year budget, there is no intention, no request before us to consider filling those. So the department has been reduced really by 6 officers in a sense. I just wanted to clear that for the public's understanding. Any further discussion on the motion to accept the request of confirmation? Hearing none, Mr. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
This is a roll call on the approval of the 7 appointments to police officer that are on screen that were just discharged from committee. On approval, Councilor Needigang.
Yes.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne. Councilor Ewan-Campen.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo.
Yes.
Councilor Klingon.
Yes.
Councilor Mba.
No.
Councilor Scott.
No.
Councilor Rossetti.
Yes.
And Councilor McLaughlin. Madam President, 7 councilors have voted in favor, 2 are opposed, 2 are absent. That motion has been approved. The 7 appointments have been made.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk will now go to item 32, and I will get in touch with the president to let him know he can return.
Very good. Item number 32 is a request of the mayor requesting acceptance of a $129,475 grant from the Department of Environmental Protection and the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust as part of the city's asset management program.
Councilor Scott.
Thank you, Madam President. On all 3 of these items, I have discussed with the administration in advance, and we'll be recommending for approval tonight, but I'm happy to speak to each of them in order. This one is a grant to assist in some of our sewer and infrastructure assessment program. There is a match required that would be assessed against the sewer retained earnings. So it's, but it's only a $70,000 match. It's certainly within bounds, and I recommend approval this evening.
Okay, so we're on item 32, and Councilor Mabai is recused from this item, and I see the president has returned. So President McLaughlin, we're on item 32. Councilor Mabai is recused.
Thank you very much. I see Rich Raish here. We also have Doug Kress. Does anyone have any questions? See no discussion. Is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Councilor Scott moves to approve. Any discussion? Hearing none. Let's see. This is item 32.
Yes.
All right, let me just scroll to it. All right, so this item can be laid on the table for approval. Oh, that's a lot. Let's do a roll call vote on this item.
Very good. There's a roll call vote on the approval of item number 32. On approval, Councilor Niedergang.
Yes.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne. Councilor Ewan Campen.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo.
Yes.
Councilor Klingon.
Yes.
Councilor Mba. Councilor Scott.
Yes.
I should note that I did not record a vote for Councilor Mba, who was recused. Councilor Rossetti.
Yes.
And Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. President, 9 councilors have voted in favor of that item. 2 councilors are absent, well, 1 recused. That motion has been approved.
All right, next item.
Item 33 is a request of the mayor requesting acceptance of a $65,496 grant with no new match required from Mass Hire, which is a function of the Metro North Regional Employment Board, to the Health and Human Services Department for youth employment.
Councilor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've discussed the request of administration. No match required, and I recommend approval tonight.
All right, Councilor Scott moves to approve. Any discussion? Hearing none. Let's do a roll call vote on approval. Councilor, Mr. Kress. I guess we don't need to speak if we're going to approve, so let's find out. Let's do a roll call vote on approval.
On approval of this item, Councilor Niedergang.
Yes.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne. Councilor Ewan Campen.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo.
Yes.
Councilor Klingon.
Yes.
Councilor Mba.
Yes.
Councilor Scott.
Yes.
Councilor Rossetti.
Yes.
And Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. President, with 10 councilors have voted in favor, 1 absent, that item has been approved.
All right, next item.
We move to item 34, which is a request of the mayor requesting acceptance of a $24,960 grant with no new match required for the Massachusetts Department of Fire Services to the fire department to purchase protective helmets and vests for firefighters who are responding to active shooter and active threat incidents.
Councilor Scott.
Again, no match required. We'll move for approval on this evening.
All right, Councilor Scott moves for approval. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote on approval.
On approval of this item, Councilor Niedergang.
Yes.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne. Councilor Ewan Campen.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo.
Yes.
Councilor Klingon.
Yes.
Councilor Mba.
Yes.
Councilor Scott.
Yes.
Councilor Rossetti.
Yes.
And Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. President, on that item, 10 councilors have voted in favor, 1 is absent. That item has been approved.
All right, next item.
We move, Mr. President, to item number 27, which is a report of the Committee on Legislative Matters, which met on April 1st.
Councilor Davis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Legislative Matters did meet on April 1st. There were a number of items on the agenda, one of which we will take up in a separate item, the number of which I wrote down and then left not anywhere near me, so we can, I think 14 maybe. So I will move to take that up after this report. But first, just a couple, well, really one update. I just want to update folks on relevant to the discussion we just had, and that is on the two items to revoke the enabling legislation for police and fire reserve lists. We've had been discussing this in the committee for a couple of weeks, and the long and short of it is that it was confirmed that there at least would be a question as to the status of folks who are on the reserve list or who are in the process to be placed on the reserve list. If we were to right now revoke those reserve lists, they may have rights that they can enforce, or should we go forward, other folks may have rights that they could enforce and claims they could bring. And it was, the minutes of the meeting are excellent on this issue. So if folks want to see the detail, of course, the video is available. But the long and short of it was that a number of counselors felt that the appropriate thing to do would be to put this one on the back burner until September, at which point we'll have a better sense for when the remaining folks on the, particularly coming through in the fire reserve list, similar to the police department, there's been a number of retirements, there are a number of vacancies. And so they want to move that forward so they get those spots filled rather than having to start over if we were to revoke, potentially have to start over if we were to revoke the enabling legislation. So that was the consensus of the committee. Obviously, if people don't agree with that, they're welcome to raise the concern. But our intent is to leave this in committee until the September timeframe, at which point we can take a look at where the timing sits, with the intent being to let the folks that are currently in the process clear out one way or the other, and then any future requests that are put up by the city would be for direct hires, not for the reserve list. So that's sort of where that one stands. Otherwise, the other main item that we discussed is the ordinance banning the use of tear gas and regulating other chemical control. Blanking on the terminology we used, but we'll call it the tear gas / crowd control ordinance. And this is an ordinance also that we've been discussing for quite some time. There's been a significant amount of input, a significant number of revisions. Councilor Eunan-Campin provided to the committee a new revision that was largely based on actually some changes that I had suggested had made and sent to him as suggestions to address some of the concerns that I had seen, and also some of the things that come up in prior meetings based on the solicitor's input, based on concerns that the chief had raised, Acting Chief Femino, to try and address those and revise the language accordingly. So we walked through that, and there was some concern raised by Chief Femino regarding specifically the way that the ordinance approaches pepper spray. Because the original ordinance included pepper spray together with other chemical substances, at the request or in response to those concerns, we pulled pepper spray out and addressed it separately. So it would not be subject to the sort of higher standards of, so let's put it, the ordinance bans the use of tear gas altogether, so set that aside. Other chemical agents are, and as well as rubber bullets and kinetic impact methods have a higher standard for what must be followed in order to use those. Pepper spray, because it is arguably less impactful, marginally at least, and has more utility, reasonable utility, at least as the chief argued. We felt that there were some reasonable arguments there. Councilor Eunan-Campin actually took the first crack at reworking it to pull that particular method, pepper spray, out. And he, I think, very creatively looked at the Department of Corrections protocols and tracked conceptually how the Massachusetts Department of Corrections addresses pepper spray, which is if it's emergency, it's emergency, and if you need to use it to to avoid bodily injury or something in an emergency situation, obviously the officer would still have that discretion. If it's not an emergency, then a warning needs to be given and an opportunity to stop, or do comply or whatever before it's used. Otherwise, it can still be used. We felt that was a reasonable approach. Again, consistent with the way the Department of Corrections addresses it. The chief raised some concerns about that, but my position, Councilor Campen's position, and pretty much everybody else in the committee, I believe, felt that the changes we'd made really did address the concerns that were raised. They were both substantive and structural to make the document read more clearly and not suggest that the officer wouldn't have discretion in the moment for that particular item. There's been some legal opinions that you've all seen in your inbox. There's a separate item from the my brain's not working tonight. Attorney Foyer and the National Lawyers Guild that had advised the council previously. They sent a follow-up letter for whatever it's worth. That was after the committee recommended approval. But the ultimate result was that the committee recommended that the council approve an ordinance consistent with the draft that we had before us. Because the draft wasn't formally before us for approval, it was worded that way, and those two items were marked work completed. I believe item 14 is a submission from myself and Councilor Ewan Campen of that draft as the committee determined it should be worded. I should note that Councilor Meadigang quite adeptly pointed out that we ought to add a sort of a implementation period so that any training, any changes that need to be made in response to the ordinance could be made, and we all felt that was totally appropriate. And so it has a 60-day period for implementation, and so after this, as I said, after disposition of this report, I will ask to take item, if I'm right, that's item 14, out of order and take that up for discussion. So, Mr. President, with that, I move that the report be accepted as submitted.
All right, Councilor Davis moves to accept the committee report as submitted. Any discussion? Hearing none. Councilor White.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the good chair. Unfortunately, it was just this afternoon that I got the city solicitor's opinion, and then also on the supplemental agenda, I saw that the Lawyers Guild had submitted something. My question is more not on the points that you discussed, but the whole qualified immunity argument that the city solicitor has raised, because that's something I really haven't thought about. So it was just presented this evening, 2 hours ago when I received his memo. So I'm just wondering if you could provide some background, what the thoughts are. Was there a legal discussion about, the ability of the city council, for instance, to do something? Does it make sense to remove that from, an argument, I guess, that a police officer could raise? So this is all new to me. So, I have to be honest that I'm a little bit uncomfortable because when I see legal arguments that I haven't had an opportunity to review, with just an hour or so before a meeting, again, it's just a measure of uncomfort. So to the extent, you could provide any information on that, I'd appreciate it.
So, Mr. President, I would, if I may.
Councilor Davis, yeah.
I'd be happy to answer the question. I suggest that we might take up the motion to approve the committee report and then have the discussion in the context of item 14 if the council agrees to take up that item out of order.
All right. Seeing no objection, let's do a roll call vote on approving the committee report.
Mr. Mr. President, this is a roll call vote on the approval of the Legislative Matters Committee report just presented. On that item, Councilor Niedergang.
Yes.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Ewan-Campen.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo.
Yes.
Councilor Klingon.
Yes.
Councilor Mba.
Yes.
Councilor Scott.
Yes.
Councilor Rossetti.
Yes.
And Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. President, all 10 councilors voted in favor of the committee report. 1 councilor is absent. The committee report has been accepted.
Okay, so could you please read item number 14?
Item number 14 is an ordinance submitted by Councilor Ewan-Campen and Councilor Davis, submitting an ordinance to regulate chemical crowd control agents and kinetic impact projectiles as approved by the Legislative Matters Committee on April 1st.
Okay, so the item is now before us. Councilor Davis, I'll give you the floor, and I saw Chief Femino just came on camera. If the chief would like to speak, he needs to be sponsored by a council member. So, Councilor Davis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll speak generally, and then I will make sure that I address Councilor White's question. So as I mentioned, this ordinance is a result of several rounds of revisions, significant input from the Solicitor's Office, from the Police Department, representatives from the Solicitor's Office, and Acting Chief Femino were participated in all of the meetings, and we did make significant substantive changes based on their input throughout. And so I thank them for their help and their input throughout the process. I'll start with Councilor White's question. So the draft where we finally landed makes no mention of qualified immunity. It does not in any way suggest that state our intent. That had been something that we'd considered, but at the advice of the Solicitor's Office, we removed that. It does state that I should pull it up so I make sure I phrase it correctly. It does state that in the enforcement section that this ordinance shall be deemed established law. The reason for that is that is the test that a court will use to it is a factor in a case that might involve qualified immunity. By no means do we purport to be making that decision on behalf of the court. It's simply a statement that we believe this ordinance to be established law, and if the court should choose to use that as part of their analysis, then we hope they would. But they certainly, by no means would be prohibited from disagreeing with us and ruling that it's not. And the opinion of the committee was that that was a reasonable bit to leave in there. But to be clear, despite anything you may have read to the contrary, there is nothing in this ordinance that states that our intent is to overrule qualified immunity or anything like. As to other issues, so this ordinance is very, very similar to ordinances that are pending in Boston and Cambridge. The Boston City Council voted to pass an ordinance that was very, very similar to this late last year. Mayor Walsh vetoed it. It has since been resubmitted. Acting Mayor Janey had voted on it originally, and so I think there's an expectation that she will sign it. If that hasn't happened, and certainly things can change. I would note that both the Cambridge, so the Boston ordinance, and I believe the Cambridge ordinance is still in the ordinance committee, I believe. They do not separate out pepper spray as a chemical crowd control agent. They treat it just the same as tear gas and everything else. Based on the input from the police department, we felt it was a reasonable case was made, and so we take a much softer approach on pepper spray specifically, as I described it in the committee report. What else? There's if folks have specific questions on other items, I'm happy to address them, but I think that's the crux of it. I mean, this is This is, in my opinion, a perfectly appropriate, perfectly reasonable ordinance that has taken into account and has to which substantive changes have been made based on the solicitor's office input and the chief's input. We certainly have recently passed other ordinances that address law enforcement and policing, and there's been no concerns raised as to authority to do so. This body is the legislative branch of the city government that, within that word means we make the laws. And certainly there are some limitations to that, but in this case, I haven't seen anything that suggests that this would be outside the bounds of our authority, particularly in light of several of the ordinances that we've passed recently. So I fully agree with my colleagues on the committee that this is ready to go, and fully support its passing this evening. And given that, I move to approve, Mr. President.
Councilor Davis moves to approve. Councilor Rossetti, you have a question?
I do, Mr. President, through you to Councilor Davis. So when I read the letter we received late this afternoon from Solicitor Wright, one piece, if I read it accurately, said that according to our city charter, the
point of order, Mr. President, if I may.
Go ahead.
So, thank you, and thank you, Councilor Rossetti. I apologize for the interruption, but the letter that to which you're referring was an opinion provided to the mayor at his request. It was not a legal opinion provided to the city council. I'm not comfortable with bringing the details of it into this meeting. Obviously, if other councilors wish to, they may. And I won't object to that, but I just want to caution folks that that is opinion of the solicitor made at provided to the mayor at the request of the mayor, and not to the council. And it also, for what it's worth, it's factually inaccurate in certain ways. So, take that for what it's worth.
Councilor Rossetti.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Councilor Davis. So in that memo, in that letter, the solicitor references our city charter, which if I read his memo, his letter to the mayor accurately, it reminds the mayor that the mayor, as the executive, has the authority with the chief of police to decide rulings on the police department. And if this city council were to adopt an ordinance, it would negate the fact that the executive in Somerville, being the mayor, according to our charter, has the authority to do so, which had me consider that on all ordinances that this council adopts, it then does go to the mayor for signature. So if the mayor signs it and you put the language, I don't have it in front of me, sir, but you reminded us that a piece of one sentence within the language of this ordinance says it would be law here in Somerville, or whatever that sentence said. You can correct me on it. So if we approve it and then His Honor the Mayor signs it, then that kind of wipes out the city charter piece of that letter from the solicitor to the mayor. Am I wrong? The concern that the solicitor had.
Mr. President, may I?
Davis.
Thank you. Through you to Councilor Rossetti. I won't deign to give a legal opinion here. I can tell you my sort of thought on that is consistent with yours, that if the mayor, I'm not sure I quite follow the logic of the argument, to be quite honest with you. I'm not sure it made a whole lot of sense to me. But, if the mayor is signing an ordinance, then it strikes me that is certainly coming from the mayor as well. Perhaps it was sort of a veiled threat against a veto override. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, to be honest. And I'm just speculating. So certainly no suggestion that it was the intent. But if that's where we are, and if we move forward in this and the mayor chooses not to sign it, I mean, I guess that's a pretty interesting statement that the mayor would be making. But we certainly, I've heard no objection from the administration nor the solicitor's office to recent ordinances that on which we've worked in close collaboration with the administration and the department that clearly impact law enforcement and policing in no greater way than I believe this does. So I'm not sure I follow really the logic of that argument. But if we were to vote on this tonight and the mayor were to sign it, it seems to me that argument is moot. Again, I'm not a lawyer in this particular role.
Okay. I guess, Mr. President, through you to my colleagues, I hemmed and hawed on this today as I was preparing for this evening's meeting about my concerns of the total authority of what the police can and cannot do. But then when I read the ordinance, reread the ordinance before us now that we're under discussion of, unless I read it wrong, and I want to be clear I read it right also, the ordinance is saying that the police department can continue to use pepper spray under certain terms for emergency, etc. So the way I read it, they can still use pepper spray as long as they deem, and there were a bunch of scenarios that would allow them to use the pepper spray. Am I correct in how I interpreted that? I just need, maybe I'll ask through you, Mr. President, to Chairman Davis of the committee. Is that correct?
Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Councilor Rossetti, you are correct. The language that governs the use of pepper spray, which I will reiterate again, is this is a departure from how other cities, Boston in particular, has addressed this, where Boston treats pepper spray in the same category as tear gas and other chemical crowd control agents. We took that out. We recognize it's a different tool, you're correct. There are circumstances and a process that an officer would have to follow. However, the most important thing, and when I mentioned sort of some reformatting, this was the main thing we did. Was we put first in the section that addresses pepper spray that if there's an emergency that requires immediate use to prevent a serious injury or death, then it can be used, and that's completely at the officer's discretion. If there's not an emergency, then the officer has to, an officer witnesses, ongoing violence, destruction, threats of violence, or imminent threats of property destruction with a weapon, and there's no lower level of force available, and they provide a clear verbal warning, and then they can use it. So, it is, as I said, it's based on the Department of Corrections process. I think we all sort of felt within the committee that it was not only reasonable, but directly addressed the concerns that the chief was raising, that the officer needs to have a discretion. And there's circumstances that we can't enumerate every circumstance, and they need to be able to decide. And so, look, yes, if it's emergency, use it. If it's not an emergency, we don't have to enumerate the circumstances. Just if you're seeing one of these an imminent threat, then just give a warning and a chance for them to stop. And not, then you can still use it. We've all felt that was a very permissive, and it's far more permissive than our neighbors are looking at, right?
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate the time that I'm being given here this evening, Mr. President. Thank you. And thank you, Councilor Davis. I just want you all to know that I also reached out to a city councilor from Cambridge today and conversed with them on what they are doing in Cambridge. And it is still in discussion. They got to a point where at one point when they brought this forward, I was told that the police department brought to their attention that they haven't used mace in years, 30 years, I think is what they said. But the police department then created a policy this past fall, I believe, putting in print that they would not. But I asked the Cambridge councilor, what about pepper spray? And they are considering pepper spray is in the language of the ordinance they're in the midst of working on, and hope to have it before them very soon. So I think they'll be watching us tonight as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, let the record show that Councilor Ballantyne has entered the meeting. Councilor Niedergang, you had a comment?
Thank you, Mr. President. I've read 3 or 4 times Solicitor Wright's letter to us, and I continue to be comfortable and enthusiastic in voting for this ordinance. I do not want to delay it. You know, we could spend hours discussing the points that were brought up, but I think there are answers to all of them, as there have been all along through this process. We've had 4 or 5 committee meetings, many of them long discussions on this ordinance. The Solicitor's Office has brought up concern after concern after concern, as has Chief Femino. Those concerns have all been addressed to my satisfaction, and changes and compromises were made in regard to some of the concerns that were raised. So I'm very comfortable with this, but I do want to sponsor Chief Femino to speak out of respect for him. He is our Chief of Police. If he, wants an opportunity to make arguments about why we should not support this, I believe he deserves that opportunity. So I would like to sponsor Chief Femino to speak if he wishes to do so. Thank you.
All right. Also, let people know that Solicitor Wright is in the audience, but Councilor Niedergang wants to speak. Sponsor Chief Femino. Any discussion? Hearing none. Chief, you have the floor.
Thank you.
Oh, looks like we lost you, Chief.
I'm trying to bring my.
There you go. We can hear you if we can't see you.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I see no point in reiterating the points of oppositions that I've made earlier during the last several meetings dating back into January. I just want to go on record that I think the original intent of this ordinance was that I see some council members were concerned about what they viewed a lack of reasonable restrictions on the use of force by the Somerville Police Department, or the lack of de-escalation skills based on what's happening in society today. But to the best of my knowledge, I want to go on record to make sure that I see that there has not been any incidents, and that I've seen that the Somerville police officers have acted in a professional manner when it comes to demonstrations in the city of Somerville, and that the goal of the department has always been to ensure those who want to exercise their First Amendment rights may do so in a peaceful manner. And with that being said, I think that when this started as a way of discussions in January, the intent of limiting the use of chemical weapons and or kinetic weapons changed during the conversations to add a component of pepper spray, which I was opposed to, and that, based on our discussions, the council seems comfortable with the current language that's before them now to vote it and to pass this ordinance as such. But I would be in support of formulating an internal policy, as Cambridge has done thus far, to limit chemical weapons. Their policy does exclude, as the wording in this statute which is to exclude pepper spray. I just want to make clear that the department has never had in its inventory as a department, or doesn't intend to have chemical weapons or kinetic weapons, would never use them, and would ensure that right to exercise their First Amendment rights would be ensured by the Somerville Police Department. Thank you for, and if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, but if not, I just want to thank the opportunity to express my opinion.
Thank you, Chief. Do we have any further discussion? I got Councilor White.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, if the solicitor could respond. Again, the only concern I have is with regard to the qualified immunity issue that the solicitor raised in his letter, and I understand it was at the request of the mayor to the mayor, but this is something that I have not been focused on because I hadn't understood that this issue could be raised. I understand what Chair Davis said, and I think I'm in agreement with him, but I would like to give the city solicitor an opportunity just to respond to this if you know, it's the will of the council.
All right, Councilor White would like to sponsor Solicitor Wright. Any discussion? Here are none. Mr. Solicitor. Frank, you there?
I am. Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Councilor White. The concern of my office before me, Assistant City Solicitor Phillips was addressing this ordinance with the committee, and I attended the last meeting, and at the request of the mayor, I wrote this opinion. I know that the council, you know, we did work closely with the council, and they did make some edits, so with the committee, I should say, and they did make some edits and amendments to it to Assistant City Solicitor Phillips issues, as well as the ones that I carried forward last week. As to qualified immunity, as I understood it at the last committee meeting, and as I read Section D3, it effectively addresses qualified immunity, even if it doesn't say so. And you know, the appropriate question is not whether the ordinance is clearly established, but whether a violation of it constitutes a violation of someone's constitutional rights, which then brings in the question of qualified immunity. So that's where I was coming from in addressing that. I wanted to make sure the mayor was aware of my understanding of how it's written. And so I raised the concern because you know, as an attorney, I know you, Councilor White, will be aware that, you know, qualified immunity is a common law defense, affirmative defense that can be raised by a police officer, and that right is based on whether or not the law that they're alleged to have violated is clearly established law. And therefore, I wanted to address the fact that, from my opinion, this ordinance cannot in any way take away an officer's right to raise the affirmative defense of qualified immunity.
All right, any further discussion? Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to speak just to acknowledge that I agree with Solicitor Wright here for the most part. And you know, to clarify, you know, what the phrasing that was in the opinion provided to the mayor was in an earlier draft. And you know, I hadn't put it in there, but I was fighting for it. And I'll admit that, you know, I tend to get a little, you know, I get my hair up in the back of my back and ready to go on these things. And this was one area where I wanted to be really, really aggressive. And so Assistant Solicitor Phillips explained some of the arguments that Solicitor Wright just repeated, and she convinced me. So we took that out, and there was another whole section that I was really fighting to keep in, but she convinced me that it probably wasn't appropriate in there either, so we took that out. What was left is simply the phrase that Section C of this ordinance shall be deemed to be clearly established law of the city of Somerville. Is it possible that means absolutely nothing? Yep, it is. And it's completely up to a court how to interpret that. And so I agree with Councilor Wright that we, you know, by no means do I think we're dictating to the court what they need to do. It's simply putting a hook there upon which they can hang their hat should they so choose. Because this, if properly passed, will be an ordinance and therefore established law of the city of Somerville, and that's all we're saying. And just one other thing I want to, just for the sake of the record, on one of the points that the chief made, and again, I really appreciate and value the input that the chief has had throughout this process. You know, as I said, we felt that we made a bunch of changes because he made some good arguments and changed our minds on a bunch of things, including moving from what we originally did, which the original language did include pepper spray as part of the definition of chemical agents. And so that was originally in there. And what changed was that he said, that shouldn't include pepper spray. This is too, this is too restrictive because pepper spray is just different. And we said, oh, yeah, fair enough. So let's treat it differently. So what we have now, as I said before, is a result of that. It's a much more permissive statute than what Boston passed because of the convincing arguments that the chief has made. So I just want to make sure that the record's clear on that. Thank you.
All right. We have a motion to approve on the floor. Is that Councilor White?
Thank you. I want to thank the good chair because I think my understanding is the same as his. Any ordinance is actually clearly established law. So I don't think this raises a strong issue of taking away qualified immunity. It is essentially going to be a court's decision. So I'm all set. I appreciate the chair's indulgence and the indulgence of the president.
All right. So we've got a motion to approve on the floor. Is there any further discussion? I would like to speak on the item, so I want to give people an opportunity to comment. Councilor Ewan-Cameron.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just want to give a huge thank you to Chair Davis, to the committee for all their work on this, to members of the public. We worked closely with Jeff Foyer from the National Lawyers Guild and a number of residents of Somerville who were deeply involved in crafting this and in helping me understand a lot of the issues around tear gas and crowd control ordinances. I also, I want to echo something that Chief Femino said, which is that the Somerville Police Department does not use tear gas and does not use a lot of the more aggressive, non-lethal chemical weapons. And I think that is wonderful. I think that is great. And, from my point of view, this ordinance in no way is meant as a attack on the behavior of the Somerville Police Department whatsoever. This is an ordinance that enshrines what to me is common sense, good policing around First Amendment right protected protests. And I think the reason that it is important to do so is because last summer, I think across the country, people saw just completely outrageous behavior from law enforcement in response to protests around police brutality and systemic racism and the murder of people of color by police officers. And in response to those protests, they often faced completely outrageous abuses of power and of tear gas and of pepper spray and of rubber bullets. And that did not happen in Somerville, which I am thankful for. And going forward, this is to help ensure that it does not happen here. So I just want to bring us all back for why we're talking about this, why this is important, and to thank you all very much for getting us to this point.
All right, last call for equal time. Going once, going twice. All right, well, before we move forward, I feel the need to speak on this item because I do have opposing feelings on it. On the one hand, I feel like we spent several months working on a tear gas ordinance in a city without tear gas, and we have an amendment for a pepper spray ordinance that says you can only use pepper spray when you have to use it. So it bothers me that, I don't feel like this is really addressing on-the-ground conditions. I feel like it actually may change the status quo, and the status quo does have a system of accountability for use of force on the state and local level. And I would much rather prefer focusing on the issues that are directly impacting people's lives on the day-to-day. That said, I can't help but notice and observe how many times we've had an ordinance that basically says the sky is blue, that says these are our values that we have stated over and over again, and now we're going to draft an ordinance to actually put some teeth behind that. And then we learn that, oh, we can't do that. That's not in our jurisdiction. I'm thinking of the Welcoming City Ordinance, which basically codified our sanctuary city status. We were told we can't do that, even though we've been calling ourselves a sanctuary city for decades. The mayor was able to publicly state that we should divest from fossil fuels, but when the city council brought it up, we were told that we can't weigh in on that because of a conflict of interest. So it really feels in a lot of ways that press releases carry more weight than ordinances in the city of Somerville. I feel like our ordinances, the reason we're doing this to begin with, is to put substance to our stated values. If we don't have an actual law saying that you can't do this or you can do this, all it is words. All it is a press release. And that goes back to my stated hashtag charter reform. This is what we need in order to make us a relevant body of government so that we can actually pass these laws and have an opinion to back us up on it at least. So I do not think this ordinance puts police officers in danger, and I would not support it if I thought it did. I care just as much as their well-being as I do the well-being of the public. But I do have to also state the very large elephant in the room that we have had a very specific, very public example of the misuse of pepper spray. And that happened years ago and only came to light recently. And I'm totally convinced that if this person had not made enemies with people more powerful than him, we might have not heard about this. So maybe this ordinance is necessary. Maybe it has to be said. Don't pepper spray people in the face while they're handcuffed and not resisting. So I'm going to vote to positively affirm that the sky is blue. And I think that this ordinance is saying exactly that. Seeing no further comment, please call the roll, Mr. Clerk. And we're going to have a roll call vote on approval.
That's correct, Mr. President. That is the motion before this body right now. This is the approval of item number 14, which is the Chemical Crowd Control Agents and Kinetic Impact Projectiles Ordinance. On approval, Councilor Niedergang.
Yes.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne.
Yes.
Councilor Ewan-Campen.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo.
Yes.
Councilor Klingon.
Yes.
Councilor Mba.
Yes to the blue sky.
Councilor Scott.
Yes.
Councilor Rossetti.
Yes.
And Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. President, all 11 councilors have voted in favor of that item. That item has been approved.
Okay, now we have enrollment and ordainment. Any discussion on enrollment? Seeing none, please call the roll on enrollment.
On enrollment, Councilor Niedergang.
Yes.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne.
Yes.
Councilor Ewan-Campen.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo.
Yes.
Councilor Klingon.
Yes.
Councilor Mba.
Yes.
Councilor Scott.
Yes.
Councilor Rossetti.
Yes.
And Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. President, on enrollment, all 11 councilors have voted in favor. That item is now enrolled.
All right, on ordainment.
On ordainment of that same item, Councilor Niedergang.
Yes.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne.
Yes.
Councilor Ewan-Campen.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo.
Yes.
Councilor Klingon.
Yes.
Councilor Mba.
Yes.
Councilor Scott.
Yes.
Councilor Rossetti.
Yes.
And Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. President, all 11 councilors have voted in favor of ordainment. That ordinance has been ordained.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll move on to the next item.
Moving on to the next item, we return to the regular order of business, and that brings us to item number 5, which is an order submitted by Councilor Strezzo that the Committee on Housing and Community Development address the prevalence of toxic stress and trauma emanating from the pandemic that has disproportionately affected women and communities of color.
Councilor Strezzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think that 5 and 6 could probably be taken together, if you're okay with that.
Mr. Clerk, please read the next item.
Item 6 is an order submitted by Councilor Strezzo that the Committee on Housing and Community Development consider whether a community-wide trauma response, such as the Baltimore Partnership for Family and Trauma-Informed Care, could work here to aid post-COVID-19 recovery and reconstruction.
Thank you. So, thank you, Mr. President. So these are just ideas of how, when we talk about the recovery process of us as a community post-pandemic, we're not there yet, but we're moving forward. I think we need to be placing the foundation of that now. And I'd like to see what other communities have successfully done to address this collective trauma. As the orders have suggested, I'm open to ideas, and I think that these are some suggestions that could definitely warrant some thought.
All right, Councilor Ballantyne would like to sign on, and Councilor Scott has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. President. It took me a while to find my my camera button. I want to thank the counselor at large for bringing this, especially number 6. This Baltimore study is an incredible one. The work that's described here in the Baltimore study in particular, relies on some pretty extensive grant funding, and this was run through, I believe, their version of DCF. Which, obviously here that's a metro regional thing with Boston, and I'm presuming you'd want to target this more towards specific populations within Somerville, correct?
I'm open. Let's explore it.
Okay. Well, I through the president then, I don't serve on HCD, so I imagine the conversation is going to happen there. I would just point out that this kind of process is a very expensive one, but certainly a very worthwhile one. If we're going to commit to making it work, it's going to require the commitment of extensive funding, which may either be from the city or through one of the Healthy Community Grants or Healing Community Grants. But in order to make it something that works, it's got to be beyond, a volunteer effort, beyond something that we just ask people to enroll in. We're going to need to put funds behind this that actually pay people for their time, pay people to engage in this process, and honestly staff up Health and Human Services or whatever other city department is coordinating program. So I would ask, when you do bring this item into committee, that you invite Ms. Ganechi from our Health and Human Services, who is in fact a trauma specialist. Because I think her input on this could be incredibly useful, more useful than mine. So I'm happily sitting out that committee meeting, but I really appreciate this. I think it's a really exciting model to be looking at, and I'll sign on to it. Thank you.
Yay! And through Mr. President, through you to Councilor Scott, I'd like to address that. I do feel optimistic that we can get some decent grants for these programs and any programs we put forward, including exploring what is coming down federally. So I'm optimistic. This is early in this stage, and I think with the discussion we have a lot of room to explore that. And yes, I was. Thank you for mentioning with the HHS trauma specialist. She was on my list, and I forgot to mention as I was planning the Housing and Community Development Committee, what it would look like. I am including the chair of the Job Retention Trust Fund, Vicki Choate, who has a lot of knowledge in this as well, and she will be speaking at this meeting. I think there's a lot of positive dialogue to have, and a lot of positive foundation we can create with this. And I'm really open to discussion. Come join us, okay, in the meeting. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, this item is laid on the table for approval and referred to Housing and Community Development. Was that both items, Mr. Clerk, or just did we do the one?
We did them both, Mr. President.
Let's let's refer them both to public health and to housing community development.
Correct.
All right.
That brings us to item number 7, which is an order submitted by Councilor Strezzo that the Director of Personnel update this council on the Economic Development Division staffing and how the city can best support the shortage of staff while preparing to assist residents and businesses in the pandemic recovery process.
Councilor Strezzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is also in thinking forward to when we are ready to begin the recovery. Okay, we're going to say it. I want to lay the foundation for the recovery process now. And as we look forward to getting out of what we all have endured in the past over a year at this point, I think we need to really discuss the Economic Development Department and a lot of the small business recovery. A lot of the recovery is going to come through the economic development. We know that they're understaffed at this point. We need to find out where the status is on that. Thank you.
All right, Councilor Ballantyne would like to sign on. Any discussion? Seeing none, this item's laid on the table for approval.
Item number 8 is an order submitted by Councilor Strezzo and Councilor Klingon that the Director of Mobility install bump outs and other traffic calming measures on Sycamore Street between Medford Street and Broadway.
Councilor Strezzo.
Thank you. Not a lot of thought on the, not a lot of discussion on this in my mind. I think this is right in front of the school, and along with this, I'd like to also find out an update of how we're also monitoring speeding in other schools, especially in front of the other schools, because we know that's a consistent problem. Thank you.
On the item, Councilor Klingon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, I just want to thank Councilor Strezzo for continuing to, help in my efforts to make Sycamore Street safer. I've asked for speed bumps in the past. I've asked for different traffic calming measures. I know that Mr. Rawson has this on his punch list, but I think this idea of bump out curbs, I was thinking more at the corner of like Evergreen and but somewhere around the school area, because it is true that even though there's gates now, kids, if a ball goes out, they run out. It's a dangerous situation on Sycamore Street right around the Winter Hill School. So I appreciate the idea.
All right, seeing no further discussion, this item's laid on the table for approval.
Item number 9 is an order submitted by Councilor Ballantyne. The Director of Personnel implement Vision Zero training for all staff who drive city vehicles.
Councilor Ballantyne.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make sure that a copy of this goes to the Director of Personnel. She is new with us 2 weeks now. Excited to have her on board, but Vision Zero is something really important, and I just want to make sure that a piece of paper goes across her desk to remind her that training is necessary for all staff who drive city vehicles. So if this could be approved with a copy to the Director, I'd appreciate it.
All right, we got Councilor Davis, Strezzo, and let's see. Sorry, I got Davis, Strezzo, and you and Campen for 9. And any discussion? Hearing none, this item's laid on the table for approval with a copy sent to the Director of Personnel.
Item number 10 is an order submitted by Councilor Ballantyne. The Director of Health and Human Services discussed how much planned funding will be allocated towards trauma training initiatives for youth in the coming years.
Councilor Ballantyne.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like this referred to the Committee on Equity, but it is in a way similar to the good counselor at large's concerns about trauma and how things, what kind of funding and what kind of initiatives will be coming in the near future. We know that with a number of our schools in the public school systems pre-COVID, they had high percentages of 70 and 80% students experiencing trauma. So I think we just have to be able to think about how we're going to be allocating the ARP money that'll come down for the feds. And I just want this to be, a discussion topic. So thank you.
All right, Councilor Klingon and Strezzo would like to sign on. Any further discussion? Seeing none, did you want this to go somewhere, Councilor Ballantyne?
Yes, I had said equity, but I don't know if the good chair of public health and public safety is going to be having a committee meeting in the next month, whether that would be a better place to have this discussion.
Councilor Davis, do you know when you're going to have the next meeting?
Was hoping to have I was hoping to have one in early May, Mr. President. Schedule dependent, and I'm happy to bring this up.
All right, does that work for you, Councilor Ballantyne?
It does. Thank you.
Very good. Seeing no further discussion, this item is laid on the table for approval and referred to Public Health and Safety.
Item number 11 is an order submitted by Councilor Ballantyne that the Director of Mobility and the Commissioner of Public Works work with the state delegation to remove the hostile architecture public benches from the Davis Square T Station.
Councilor Ballantyne.
Thank you, Mr. President. There was a bit of concern with the redesign of the benches in the Davis Square T stop, and the state. I know that at least one of our state reps has, tried to contact the MBTA on this, but I just think it needs a little more push from the city of Somerville. And I would just ask that it goes to public utilities, public works, and similarly, we don't want it at the Davis Square T station. On number 12, I just want to reconfirm that the city of Somerville also is not install or using hostile architecture on public benches. So I would ask that they both be referred to public utilities, public works.
Okay, I'm getting a lot of requests to sign on. I would appreciate it if people would stay one item at a time, but everyone wants to sign on to items number 11 and 12. And you wanted this to go to public utilities, public works?
Yes, Mr. President.
All right, seeing no further discussion, this item is laid on the table for approval and referred to public utilities and public works.
And item 12 is an order by Councilor Ballantyne, the Commissioner of Public Works, ensure that no hostile architecture public benches are installed in the city.
All right, Councilor Ballantyne.
Thank you. Similar comment, and I would ask that this be referred to public utilities, public works.
All right, the whole council would like to sign on. Seeing no discussion, this item is laid on the table for approval and referred to public utilities and public works.
Item 13 is a resolution submitted by Councilor Ballantyne that Tufts University submit an institutional master plan and not expand its housing beyond the campus university zone so residents know about any planned long-term changes and understand the impacts to their neighborhoods.
Councilor Ballantyne.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the last Housing and Community Development meeting, there was a long discussion on some old orders from 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago that were still in committee. And I would just ask that a copy of this be sent to Tufts University, but it's a similar problem. They're not using their university zoning. They're not telling us in a community process, all-inclusive way on what their intentions are, their long-term intentions are, so that the neighbors and the city can anticipate the impacts that they're going to have on our neighborhoods. So I just would like a copy of this to go to them and it be approved. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, Councilor Davis would like to sign on. Any discussion? Councilor Ballantyne, I have a question. What is considered the campus university zone?
Mr. President, it is at the top of the hill. It's Sawyer Street, so that's one down from Professor's Row. And it's both sides of Sawyer. Okay. And it goes from Packard, and then it goes down Packard to Powder House Boulevard, and over to the Rotary, and then going towards, I guess it would be considered the west,
Sawyer to Curtis, over towards Curtis when it turns into Medford. And so they own, so they're looking to expand housing outside of their university zone. And the push has been, and looking back at the Sustainable Neighborhoods Working Group recommendations from 2015, they were even pushing, in addition to me since 2014, to get university housing on campus, and that's where the housing should be.
Okay, so in other words, they have plenty of space in their footprint to build housing.
Yes, and they can go up in height also.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Seeing no further discussion, this item is laid on the table for approval with a copy sent to the Tufts University, the Dean of Tufts University, President of Tufts University.
Very good. Item number 15 is an order submitted by Councilor Ewan Campen and Councilor McLaughlin that the Chief of Police update this council on Somerville's restorative justice program, including a description of what sorts of cases are referred for restorative justice and how those decisions are made.
Councilor Ewan Campen.
Thank you, Mr. President. So Councilor McLaughlin and I received an email about a week ago from a resident who first learned about Somerville's restorative justice program through a news article that was about the plant thief active last year in Somerville, who underwent a restorative justice approach in Somerville. And so this resident kind of wanted to know more about the program, how decisions are made about what sorts of cases go there. And it made me realize that I also, share a lot of questions and interest in the program. So my understanding is that the City Council's Public Safety Committee was last briefed on this issue about a year ago. And so I'd be very interested to hear more what's happened since then. And in particular, I'll also just note the resident who reached out mentioned that she is particularly interested in whether or not a restorative justice approach can be used in the context of automobile crashes. So for many members of the bicycle and pedestrian safety advocacy community, this is something that there's a lot of interest in, in the aftermath of crashes, instead of going through the criminal justice system if there are restorative justice approaches. And so I just wanted to raise that as a particular issue that I'd be very interested in discussing. And I would ask that this go to public safety, please.
All right, Councilor Ballantyne would like to sign on, and Councilor Ba has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councilor Ewan Campen, for putting this forward, and to you, Mr. President. And if you guys remember, when Chief Fallon was retiring, that was what I said, that is what he didn't deliver, and it's I'm really excited that we can continue this conversation. Thank you, and I would like to sign on, please.
Councilor Scott would like to sign on as well. Any further discussion? Hearing none, this item is laid on the table for approval and referred to Public Health and Safety.
Item 16 is a resolution submitted by Councilor Ewan Campen, Councilor Niedergang, and Councilor Klingon that the administration include a sidewalk snow shoveling program in the fiscal year 22 budget focused on pedestrian streets, major north, south, and east-west routes, sidewalk corners, and crosswalks with piles of snow, MBTA bus stops, and senior buildings.
Councilor Ewan Campen.
Thank you, Councilor, Mr. President. So the City Council approved an order several months ago to initiate a series of conversations on what the city can do about removing snow from sidewalks in Somerville, as we do for streets. And, without going into the details tonight, this is not just a matter of convenience. For many Somerville residents, this is a serious issue of equity and safety and mobility. For residents with mobility issues, strollers, wheelchairs, crutches, scooters, but also, folks without any of those issues, the state of our sidewalks after a big winter storm can essentially confine people to their houses for days on end. And we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to clear roads, and we owe it to our residents to make sure that there are also safe ways to walk during the winter. And given the cost and the complexity of a program like that, it seems pretty clear that Somerville will need to make decisions around prioritizing. what areas to focus on, what sorts of streets, what sorts of infrastructure to clear, where the snow will go, what equipment to use. So over the past few months, I've met with members of the Department of Public Works, with Mobility and Engineering Department, and we also had a discussion about this in Public Works and Public Utilities 2 weeks ago. And I believe that we have a good sense of what a policy would look like in broad strokes. And this is one that would focus on the pedestrian streets, the designated pedestrian streets in the city, as well as all kind of publicly owned sidewalks, of course, which we ostensibly clear now, but I think there's room for improvement. And in addition to that, kind of as financially feasible, extending up our major north-south and east-west routes, focusing on public transit access, senior residences, and also an issue that Councillor Niedergang has, I think, very insightfully brought up around corners, where snow often tends to get piled up from both directions, and there's often, residents are kind of in a position where they're facing a huge wall of ice. So, it's clear to me this is an interdepartmental issue that needs someone in the administration to kind of coordinate the many issues. So the request is for that to be included in next year's budget, for there to be a specific, kind of a pilot project that someone or a group of people in the administration are championing, so that we can actually make this happen. And I would ask that this please go to the Finance Committee. Thank you.
All right, I see Councilor Boss, Grezzo, and Ballantyne would like to sign on, and Councilor Scott has a comment.
Thank you to my colleague and comrade in Ward 3 for bringing this forward. This is exactly the kind of measure that I'm both personally excited about, and I know many of my constituents are as well, and also exactly the kind of prioritization and direction setting that I have asked for and am very eager to take up in the Finance Committee. Our next meeting of the Finance Committee is on the 20th, I believe. But there are multiple eminent domain takings and very large discussion items right there, which is already going to make that a very late meeting. So I would anticipate this being on the agenda for early May. I'd happily invite anybody, I happily invite the councilor from Ward 3 and other members of the administration that he's been working with on this to join the discussion so that we can have a substantive and efficient discussion that night. I'm enormously grateful, and I'm happy to sign on to it. Thank you, sir.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, this item's laid on the table for approval and referred to the Finance Committee.
Item number 17 is an order submitted by Councilor McLaughlin and Councilor Klingon that the city solicitor and the chief of police discussed with the Committee on Legislative Matters a formal policy or an ordinance to decriminalize or deprioritize arrests for drug possession and prioritize treatment over incarceration.
Okay, so this falls under the category of things that are already supposed to be happening that we might as well put into law or code to make it real. So we've, for the past several years, have had a deprioritization of possession of drugs as opposed to distribution. This is about people using drugs for their personal use. The person they're hurting are themselves, and they are not going to be helped by being sent to jail and going through the criminal justice system only to learn how to become better criminals. So this is already kind of our policy. The chief of police did provide me with a list of arrests over the past 5 years since this became our policy, and there are very minimal amount of people arrested for possession, and hopefully we will have a discussion about that matter in the Public Health and Safety Committee when we have it. But all this is basically saying what we're already saying we're doing, and I think it needs to be more formalized. It has to be understood that Somerville is leading the way, not only on substance abuse prevention, but also preventing people from getting caught up in the criminal justice system. So I see Councilor Bauer would like to sign on. Scott, Ewan, Camp, and Cal say the whole. Oh no, I don't. Davis, Ballantyne, Ewan, Campen, Scott, and Councilor Kling would like to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, again, I want to thank you for get involved with me in this since we've been working on this stuff for so long. And ultimately, you nailed it in terms of my pride in terms of Somerville being having a police force that does try to take a harm reduction approach, but doesn't tell anybody about it. So, like through, in 2014 and 15, when the opiate epidemic was really raging, it was in the headlines all the time. Many police departments were taking these bold steps, and they were part of like the Priority program out of Gloucester. And we actually were also a sister program to that, but we didn't broadcast it. And sometimes we'd say, well, maybe that's maybe we're sweeping any issues under the rug. But I think it's really important that people know, and because now we see the results of when people don't know what we're up to, that we've been doing these great things in the community around decriminalize, essentially taking those measures to decriminalize. I think you're right. I think it's high time to put it in writing and formalize it. And so thanks again.
All right, Councilor Strezzo would like to sign on. Any further discussion? Hearing none, this item is laid on the table for approval and referred to legislative matters.
Item number 19 is an order submitted by Councilor McLaughlin that the arborist inspect the tree in front of the Edgerly School on Otis Street and remove it if it's dead.
This item is laid on the table for approval.
20 is an order by Councilor McLaughlin, Commissioner of Public Works, repair the cracked sidewalk on Otis Street from Cross Street to number 15 Otis.
This item is laid on the table for approval.
21 is an order by Councilor Klingon and Councilor White that the city solicitor work with this council on an ordinance to deny, revoke, or suspend permits to companies with a history of engaging in unsafe, hazardous, or dangerous practices based on work safety histories or concerns.
Councilor Klingon.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the clerk could also read number 22, I'll just take them up together and explain.
Councilor Strezzo would like to sign on to 21. Mr. Clerk, please read item 22.
Item 22 is a resolution submitted by Councilor Klingon and Councilor White supporting House Bill 1943 and Senate Bill 229 relative to workplace safety and the disclosure of violations.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. I just want to, so this came about, first it started with my moment of silence to the two individuals who died just a couple of months ago while working in Boston, to which then Councilor White put in an inquiry around whether or not we could even consider OSHA violations in terms of permitting. And to which we were given the answer of like, well, the state already vets them and really, no, like, or we don't need to do that because the state already vets them. But then I came across a big article that said that there was legislation up at the State House trying to do just that. And it's its third go around in 2017. It was introduced, and then I think again in 2020, and then and then last year it ran out of steam, and then I believe it's been brought back in front of the up to the legislature again. Unfortunately, this time on the heels of another couple of tragedies in working conditions. So this is ultimately, we want to support this legislation. Then there really wouldn't necessarily be a need for the local option. But if it does fail at the state level again, as Somerville is famous for leading the way, I think it's important that we, we set our community standards as such that we follow in basically the footsteps of Boston after 2016 when the two gentlemen drowned in the South End. They were being employed by a company who had 5 OSHA violations who never disclosed them. Marty Walsh passed an ordinance that basically requires companies to disclose their OSHA violations. And so an ordinance can be done and is in order and should be done here in Somerville, and I feel strongly about that. And if it'll help protect workers, make us a better, stronger city for workers. That's why me and Councilor White brought this stuff forward. So, I appreciate anybody's support.
Okay, on items 21 and 22, we have Councilor Barr sponsoring, Ballantyne, Strezzo, Scott, and Ewan Campen, and Councilor White has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just real brief, Councilor Klingon said it all, but one of the things I think that is a ultimately one of the most important roles of city government is to protect people's health and their lives, their well-being. And we've seen too many instances of this where people are dying, that people are suffering, severe consequences working for corporations, businesses who've obtained permits, and then they're not implementing appropriate safety measures. So this is one way for us to take, I think, strong action, to protect workers' health and safety, and also our own residents as well. So I'm in full support and thank Councilor Klingon.
All right, Councilor Davis would like to sign on to both items as well. Any further discussion? Hearing none, these items will be laid on the table for approval and referred to legislative matters. Well, actually, let's refer item 21 to legislative matters, and item 22 will just be approved.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Sorry, with the copy sent to the our state delegation.
State delegation, yes.
Certainly. Item 23 is a report of the Committee on Legislative Matters, which met on March 18th and was unfinished business from the last meeting.
Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move that the report be accepted as submitted.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, the committee report is laid on the table for approval.
And item number 24 is a report of the Committee on Legislative Matters, which met as a committee of the whole on March 24th.
Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. On this one, I'll just note that there's a website, which is somervillema.gov/civilian oversight. Ben, correct me if I got that wrong. And people can see the entire presentation that was part of the meeting on the 24th, and also submit comments on our process for civilian oversight. So assuming I got that, they get the website right, Councilor Campin?
Yes, sir. Through the chair.
All right, very good. So with that, Mr. President, I move that the report be accepted as submitted.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, the committee report is laid on the table for approval.
That brings us to item number 25, which is a report of the Committee on Finance, which met on April 6th.
Councilor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee met on April 6th. It was a very long agenda at the request of the administration. The meeting went for 3.5 hours, which is about double what we've been doing lately. There were some substantive process discussions at the very start of it that I encourage all members of this council to watch, especially at the very top of the meeting. There was a discussion of the capital investment plan, capital improvement plan, basically our roadmap for massive projects that will require bonding going forward. It is very much still in the works. They are going back to the drawing board in terms of how they prioritize projects. And it is a very long discussion that goes also deep into our current debt service load and our bond rating. So an excellent discussion, exactly the kind of scrutiny that that the committee members are well known for, and I really, really encourage folks to watch that. There was also some discussion there of the ARP funds that are still in the process of being determined about how they will be dispersed and how much we'll be able to get our hands on. There was also a discussion about the vacancies currently in the city. Again, there are approximately 100 open positions in the city. Over 40 of them are union positions. Our new acting director of personnel was present for this discussion and pointed out that in addition to the standard difficulties of hiring for city positions and pay scale issues for our union laborers, there's also the issue that all of the hiring processes are apparently entirely on paper. There has not been any investment in updating of our systems to more modernize our hiring process and actually make it possible to fill these positions in a reasonable amount of time. So it is a hopeful conversation, and hopefully we will be able to improve things. I'm very grateful for the director's attendance. Again, a useful conversation for members of the public to watch, if they're curious as to why we don't have a tree trimming crew or maybe aren't getting potholes filled very fast. Then we moved on to mid-year position requests. There are 6 positions that were requested by the administration. Going through them, just as a brief recap, everybody received the memo, I believe, from the administration describing these positions. One is a Deputy Director of Engineering Projects. One is a Senior Project Manager for Streetscapes. And then there is one further position which did not come to the Finance Committee, but is also being created and being funded entirely with CARES Act funding. Both of these positions are being funded entirely with lag money from unpaid salaries, going back to the previous issue of having a lot of vacancies in the city. And there is, and then subsequently, and one of those is related to the Somerville Alliance for Safe Streets requests that the council recently received. There was also a mid-year position request for planning and zoning to establish a new planner position. As part of that discussion, we found that they are in the process of filling their vacancies, 2 vacancies, which is very exciting. There's a huge backlog in the planning department. This position is specifically to help handle the increased amount of information requests that are coming in due to the new zoning, and to allow them to actually engage with the long-term planning projects, which they have not been able to get to due to bandwidth issues. There was a mid-year position request from the communication department, 2 of them, one for 311 to create a quality manager. There was a great discussion about how the volume of calls has increased. Director Craig talked about the increase in volume that they have been seeing in 311 and how much our constituents are really relying on that service, especially since they can't just walk to City Hall anymore. This was a position that had been requested earlier and discussed earlier by the council and had not been instated by the mayor. Now it's being added. And then the final request from communications was to establish a director level position for the Office of Immigrant Affairs. Director Taylor asserted that the Office of Immigrant Affairs and the staff there had grown beyond her capacity to directly manage. And there was a very long description of all the services that sub-unit of communications provides in the city. All of those positions were recommended for approval. The only piece that required allocation from free cash was the director level position in the Office of Immigrant Affairs, a meager $5,400 from free cash. After that, there were some miscellaneous funding requests, one of which was very exciting, which is the creation of an energy stabilization fund. We have been working with the Office of Sustainability and Director Sellers Garcia. They've been working very diligently to not just make our city greener, but actually to create some energy cost savings in the city. So this fund creation is basically a mechanism where we can capture those cost savings and ensure that they get directly reinvested into more energy efficiency and green measures. So it's been created, and the sum of $294,000 and change that's being appropriated into it from free cash is directly traceable back to energy cost savings from programs that department has implemented over the last few years. So it's our hope that that will create more reinvestment and a cycle of virtue there. Everybody's very excited to establish it. There is an $80,000 request to fund a consultant for Director Jenkins and the Arts Council to create a larger cultural plan. There was some discussion about whether or not he needed more staffing, but at the moment the request is for a consultant, and so $80,000 is requested for appropriation there. And finally, there was a minor adjustment as our Director of Incident Command, I believe, left to go to Boston. There's been some minor changes in staffing as different people move up into roles. And so there was an additional transfer needed into the salaries line of Somerset to fund those salary adjustments. Finally, there was discussion of prior year invoices, once again returning to city departments who are trying to right the ship. DPW presented nearly $16,000 in unpaid invoices. There were Easy Pass tolls dating back to 2017 that had been unpaid. They just were sitting there. So the department is working on ways that we can actually have our Easy Pass tolls paid on a regular basis as opposed to accruing late fees for the last 4 years. There were about $1,500 in tolls. They're also trying to figure out why those vehicles were crossing the Tobin Bridge so often and where they were going. I hope we'll have an update on that in a future meeting. There was also, thanks to Councilor White, pointing out there was a $12,000 invoice for 1 month of work at Lincoln Park for mowing the grass and for removing trash from the planting beds, not for highly skilled work here, just very straightforward landscaping, which seems surprising that it would not be part of something that our standard grounds crew would do. $12,000 for a month of mowing the grass seems like a pretty high tab. So it is a past invoice. The council has recommended to approve it, but rest assured we will continue to look into what practice is hiring a private landscaping company to do fairly routine labor that our DPW crews should be able to do. Finally, there was an item requesting some money for purchasing about 170 handguns from the police department from a prior year. That item was withdrawn by the administration for unspecified reasons, apparently some issue with the invoice. Our last items that we had on the agenda that night were for the Aldersey eminent domain taking for $3.5 million. As the hour was late and it was not time critical, we kept that item in committee. It is being joined tonight, I see later on the agenda, by a $5 million order of taking for the Armory. So I anticipate both of those will be agenda items on the meeting for the 20th, as well as a discussion of the water and sewer rate increases. That may also be of particular interest to members of the council, given that it is a higher rate increase that we requested last year based on the draft letter that we received, and also based on the constituent calls I've gotten about water and sewer bills nearly doubling this year for people. So I think that'll be an important conversation. If members of the council would like me to make that a committee of the whole meeting, please do request that. Make that request as soon as possible for scheduling purposes. But I'm also happy to keep it as just a meeting of the Finance Committee, as our president has generally advised us to do. With that, I ask that I'll yield to comment on the report to Councilor Rossetti before I ask that the report be approved.
Well, you can ask. Councilor Scott can have ask for the committee report to be approved, and on approval, we can have Councilor Rossetti and Strezzo.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll ask for it to be approved then.
Councilor Scott moves for approval. On that, Councilor Rossetti.
Thank you. Mr. President, through you to the Chair of Finance, Councilor Scott, I apologize for missing your meeting. I slept. I had my vaccine for COVID, which I was very grateful for, but it knocked me out. I did follow afterwards, and I agree. I will approve the report and the requests, but I just want to vocalize my concern that with adding these new positions to the budget mid-year and year, actually it's more than it's beyond mid-year, but I worry about next year's budget, because every fall when we're voting the tax rate, and it sometimes is painful, we are reminded by our good colleague, Councilor White, that it's budget time, that we want to make any sort of relief to the taxes that we vote every November, the real estate taxes, then, it's budget time that we have that ability to try and help with some savings if possible. So I guess I'm venting to the administration right now, and I know we have Ms. Brancaniello and Director Weber here this evening, and I hope they are listening. I'm actually going to ask if we could hear from Director Weber to confirm, but I'm not looking to do layoffs or cuts, but we may have to. And in following the vacancy report, I believe there's over 100 vacancies right now, and there has been quite a few for a while. So I guess I wonder if the city has been able to function with that many vacancies, and we are creating new positions, and some of these new positions have been requested by my colleagues over the last couple of budget seasons in different departments. We're all grateful that those positions are now added, but it's just going to impact the budget next year because it'll be a full year salary, full year's benefits, and let's be reminded that next year's tax bill will now start to show the painful impact of our beautiful Somerville High School renovation project, and it's costly. And I'll gladly pay that bill because I wholeheartedly supported that project. But if we're going to keep adding more positions now, we've already added some previously this year. We've added a bunch by this committee report. Maybe there'll be more coming before the end of this fiscal year. And then we're going to go into budget discussions, and we're going to be begging for some new positions, I'm sure. So I guess I want the administration, when they are going through everything with their department heads, to revisit all these vacancies that have been in the city for the year and beyond, and how necessary are these positions after all? Can we do some adjustment? Should we do some adjustment? So, Mr. President, I would just ask if Director Weber can acknowledge that she's heard my rant and that she could bring that discussion back to the administration as they prepare to present budget to us.
All right, Ms. Weber, can you acknowledge receipt of said rant with a positive affirmation?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councilor Rossetti, yes, I have acknowledged Councilor Rossetti's concerns. I note them and appreciate that, and we'll certainly take that back to the budget staff as well as to the mayor's office. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilor Scarza?
Thank you, Mr. President. I had a question through you to Chair Scott.
Go ahead.
Oh, there he is. Hi. I'm curious about, could you please reiterate, sorry I missed the meeting, but can you please reiterate with some of the DPW, say, tolls and 2017 charges, how much we're looking at in late fees, or what you discovered in committee?
Yeah, well, actually, so the invoices are attached in the items in the committee report. So you can look at the individual dates that trucks were going over the Tobin Bridge. There's a transfer station up north. I've actually seen these trucks go in that direction from time to time. But it's the same pay-by-plate letter that you might get if you ever drive over. But instead of opening it and paying it, it sat somewhere in DPW since 2017. So it was about $1,500 in tolls and late fees.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's all I have to ask. And
I believe there was an episode of The Wire based around this. Councilor Scott, you had a closing statement.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'm afraid to say I've never seen The Wire, so I'll have to get a summary from you later. But I want to thank especially Councilor Rossetti for her comments there. they very closely mirrored some of the conversation that was had in the committee, not just about the hiring of these positions, which right now isn't costing the taxpayers any money because, again, it's all being paid from lag money of currently unfilled, those 100 unfilled positions in the city, but it will substantially constrain the budget that we will be receiving in hopefully 2 months. And just in addition to the constraint on next year's budget, the additional position creations will substantially constrain our next mayor, whoever that ends up being, who may want to rebalance staffing, may want to direct resources, and the process of laying off positions that have been created is, I think we've always seen, a much more challenging one than simply creating new positions. So the possible impairment of our next mayor's ability to prioritize and allocate funds was discussed and is also worth discussing in the context of approving another $8.5 million in eminent domain taking. So it was raised, and in this particular case, several mayoral candidates were full-throated in support of these. So, but I think the concern is a valid one and one that we'll continue to raise in committee. Thank you. With that, I do ask that the committee report be accepted.
All right. Any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, let's do a roll call vote to approve the committee report.
There's a roll call vote on the approval of the Finance Committee report just presented. On approval, Councilor Niedergang.
Yes.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne.
Yes.
Councilor Ewan-Campen.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo.
Yes.
Councilor Klingon.
Yes.
Councilor Mba.
Yes.
Councilor Scott.
Yes.
Councilor Rossetti.
Yes.
And Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. President, all 11 councilors have voted in favor of approval. The committee report has been accepted.
Okay. So we have 4 items that require a roll call vote. We could do them all at once or we could do them separately. Does anyone have any objection to taking all 4 items up at once? Speak now or forever hold your peace. There are none. Let's do a roll call vote on the 4 items. Could you read those, Mr. Clerk?
Yeah, Mr. President, this is a roll call vote on four items. They are all related to stabilization fund matters. The first is 211467, which creates the Energy Stabilization Fund. The second is what actually appropriates $294,399 to that new Energy Stabilization Fund. The third one, item 211470, repurposes $80,000 in the COVID-19 Stabilization Fund, and that's in order to fund a Somerville Cultural Plan. And finally, the last item, item 211473, appropriates $8,865 from the Salary and Wage Stabilization Fund, and that's for the temporary salary adjustment for as Councilor Scott mentioned. So, on approval of those 4 items, Councilor Niedergang.
Yes.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne.
Yes.
Councilor Ewan-Campen.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo.
Yes.
Councilor Klingon.
Yes.
Councilor Mba.
Yes.
Councilor Scott.
Yes.
Councilor Rossetti.
Yes.
And Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. President, all 4 stabilization fund items have been approved by this council.
Okay, very good. So before we move on, the time now is 9:13. I'm going to have a little 5-minute recess so people can take care of themselves. We are in recess until 9:17. 9:18.
9:19. It just turned to 14.
9:20 it is. All right, I'm going to call this meeting back to order. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll to, well, it's 9:19. Yeah. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll to establish a quorum.
This is roll call in order to determine the presence of a quorum following the recess. Councilor Niedergang.
Here.
Councilor White.
Here.
Councilor Ballantyne.
Here.
Councilor Ewan Campen.
Here.
Councilor Davis. Councilor Davis. Councilor, I don't record Councilor Davis being present. Councilor Strezzo.
Present.
Councilor Klingon. Councilor Klingon.
Present.
Councilor Mba.
Present.
Councilor Scott.
Present.
Councilor Rossetti.
Present.
And Councilor McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Mr. President, I record 10 councilors present, 1 is absent. We have a quorum.
All right, next item.
Next item is item number 26, which is a report of the Committee on Housing and Community Development, which met on March 31st.
Councilor Strezzo.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to keep brief, at least with the Tufts discussion. There was a whole lot of Tufts discussion. We did an intermission and then went right into a lot of orders involving Tufts. So for those specific items, I strongly encourage my colleagues to please read the minutes on that. I do want to just highlight the update on the housing crisis that the COVID pandemic has cost a lot of residents. We had Fred Berman from the Office of Housing Stability to update the council, the committee on this. He said that there has been an increase of funding and federal money utilizing state funds to pay down and eliminate causes of eviction. The system has increased over time. There's now a 12-month cap with no dollar limit, and programs are now paying up to $1,500 for utility assistance for residents in crisis, even if they do not have a shutoff notice. I also want to mention that in the fully first year staff of 2019 of the Office of Housing Stability, they had about 584 cases of residents in crisis, housing crisis. In the past year, there has been 1,688 cases. Some are referred instantly to the Somerville Homeless Coalition, but again, with any kind of rental assistance, there's an application process, and they're averaging about 140 cases a month. And with that application process, because of being able to hire contractors to help with the intake process, the typical 3-month process that it's been over the past years has been condensed to about between a couple of weeks to a month. So that's a huge difference in timing. So there are 1,600 referrals that have come to the Office of Housing Stability, which could be from the Health Alliance, the Somerville Family Learning Collaborative, could be duplicates or households with 4 or more people. And when it comes to how many of those households seeking rental assistance and housing assistance and are in crisis, Mr. Berman stated that many of the families have children in them. This agenda item will remain on the agenda item of housing and community development while this crisis continues and while the pandemic rolls on. And then one more item that I just want to brief the council on is the update on the playground communication boards. We are working, we had directors Jill Lathan and Luisa Oliveira present to talk about the what the process would look like. Again, communication playground boards are boards that would be installed in Somerville playgrounds that would help children that either are nonverbal or children that don't yet have the tools, the verbal tools, to express what they want, and the children have a choice to point to the picture to explain what they need. And we're currently in the process, and I ask if any families or if there are anyone that may have suggestions on what what could be placed on the communication boards, because that is what we are currently working on in committee, what specific phrases and pictures could be most useful to the community. I ask to please either send me an email or reach out to Director Oliveira to voice. We're currently trying to pull as many suggestions and consolidate that as possible. It will be in an upcoming agenda to discuss and also budget how much that would cost and the process forward, but it is moving forward, and that's really exciting. So that's my quick summary of that. I ask that the report be approved as submitted.
All right, any discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, this item's laid on the table for approval.
Item number 28 is a report of Committee on Public Utilities and Public Works, which met on March 30th.
Councilor Kernan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the council and the public. In attendance are myself, Vice Chair Councilor White, and Ward 7 City Councilor Katiana Valentine. Also in attendance were Kushbu Weber from the Mayor's Office, Luisa Oliveira, Eric Weissman from DBW, and we had Councilor Needigang as a special guest for a couple of orders, along with Rich Raish, Nick Antanovic from ISD, and Jill Lathan. And so, there was a number of issues discussed, the bulk of which were around the school buildings, mainly as far as the structure goes and maintaining the buildings. I think it was a good conversation. I think it's something that needs to be fine-tuned, and we need to see about, you hear from different council committees and councilors about the staffing levels being low. So that all kind of played into it, as well as a little discussion on we had a presentation from Rich Raish, PowerPoint presentation about the response to COVID and the different ventilation options. And because the situation's fluid and things are changing, that ultimately the direction that we're going in with the upgrade of the systems is the direction that we're going to continue on. So all that's in the committee. You can watch the video and read the notes. And with that, I ask that the committee report be accepted as submitted.
All right, any discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the committee report is laid on the table for approval.
Item number 29 is a request to the mayor requesting approval of amendments to the zoning ordinance, body art services use standards, and table 9.1.1 permitted uses.
This item will be referred to the land use committee with a copy sent to the planning board.
Item number 30 is a request to the mayor requesting approval of amendments to the zoning ordinance to regulate rooftop mechanical systems and mechanical penthouses.
This item will be referred to the land use committee with a copy to the planning board.
31 is a request to the mayor requesting approval of the 2021-22 HUD one-year action plan for CDBG, home, and ESG programming.
This item will be referred to housing and community development.
Item 35 is a request to the mayor requesting the confirmation of the appointment of Ann Gill as Director of Personnel.
Item will be referred to confirmation of appointments.
Item 36 is a communication from the Director of Water and Sewer submitting the fiscal year 22 water and sewer rate proposal.
Item will refer to the Finance Committee.
And item 37 is a communication from the Retirement Board notifying this council of a vote at the Retirement Board's May 27th meeting regarding a 2021 cost of living adjustment for eligible retirees.
Councilor Scott, did you want to comment on that last order?
Just to once again remind everybody, this is the rate submission for this year. Please take a look at it, and if you would like it to be a committee of the whole, please get in touch. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Item 37 is laid on the table and placed on file.
That brings us up to item number 38, which is an item of new business.
Thank you. I wish to move to waive the readings of items 38 through 92 and have them all approved this evening for the folks who are watching this. These are all traditional license renewals. Prior to suggesting their approval, I discussed them all with the city clerk to make sure the paperwork is in order and also to make sure that there are no complaints having been lodged against any of them by any of our residents. And then once I receive those assurances from the clerk, then I ask that they be approved, especially during the current pandemic. I think it makes sense not to put further tasks on businesses to come before us where their approval should be pretty straightforward. So I just want folks at home to know we are doing our job, and that's the philosophy that we're following, and my moving to approve these items this evening. Thank you.
All right, Council White moves to waive the readings of items number 38 to 92 and move for approval. Any discussion? Hearing none, these items are laid on the table for approval.
That brings us up to item number 93, which is a communication from Scott Zink proposing a zoning amendment to rezone his property at 471 Somerville Ave from urban residential to MR4.
Item referred to the Land Use Committee with a copy of the Planning Board.
Item number 94 is a communication from the Attorney General's office submitting comments regarding a council item which called for a better future for Somerville's female workforce.
All right, this item's laid on the table, placed on file, and referred to the Housing Community Development.
Item number 95 is a communication from the district attorney responding to an old item of the council's regarding the investigation of the murder of Deanna Kremen.
This item's laid on the table and placed on file.
And number 96 is a communication from Jim Bossy submitting comments about Tufts student housing.
This item's laid on the table, placed on file.
Item 97 is an ordinance that's been submitted by Councilors Davis and Scott that amends the domestic partnership ordinance as attached and as further necessary to address issues that are in the existing version.
All right, any discussion on the item? Councilor Davis?
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. President, this is just so folks know what we're talking about. This can go to legislative matters if it's your will. But this, so Cambridge took up the changes to, they had a domestic partnership ordinance, as you recall, and they, after we passed ours and took out the limitation that it be just two people, Cambridge took up this issue and made some, tracked what we did, but also made some, in my opinion, some improvements, some things that we either missed or just, didn't decide to tackle. And so I made some, I revised I made some proposals to revisions to our ordinance to track those, specifically a requirement that folks live together. I'm not required to live in the same house as my wife, so and also a requirement that members of a domestic partnership aren't also in a marriage. And in the next item, you'll see why that is an issue. Marriage affords lots of benefits, and sometimes you maybe need to be in a marriage in order to get health insurance, for example. And that's might be there may be a lot of reasons why folks want to do that, but no reason why they shouldn't be able to. So Cambridge took those steps. I felt like it was appropriate to consider them here as well. There's a few other things that Cambridge did that I wanted to have a discussion in committee, one of which relates to identifying dependents. That was going to take a lot more drafting, and frankly, I just said let's throw it into committee and have the conversation before we get into too much keystroking. So that's the thrust of these changes. As I said, primarily to give a thumbs up to the improvements Cambridge made and say yeah we'd like to do that as well. And so I would ask that they go to committee and we can tackle those, please.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, this item referred to legislative matters.
Item 98 is an order submitted by Councilor Davis and Councilor Scott that the city solicitor prepare a home rule petition to recognize any member of a domestic partnership as a dependent for group insurance commission coverage and as a spouse with respect to other applicable laws.
Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. So briefly, this was, I alluded to this in my last in the discussion related to the last item. You know, when we undertook to make the changes to the domestic partnership ordinance, or to put it into place and to not require, well, I mean, whatever, just to put it into place. I think that, you know, certainly my intent and a lot of what we talked about even in committee was that this would afford rights, at least within the city of Somerville, to folks that married folks have otherwise. And we put language in specifically attempted to do that, folks would be, members of the domestic partnership would be treated the same way that married folks would be. And I was told from folks that the city had informed them that domestic partners were not eligible for the city health insurance, the GIC insurance. And Solicitor Wright gave me some information. I asked for an explanation. He provided one, which makes sense. This actually this specifically came up pre-marriage equality, back when domestic partnerships were first, you know, coming into form. And the court specifically said, no, I mean, the GIC specifically says spouse means, you know, in matrimony or some such. It's pretty specific in the language. And so, you know, didn't seem like that was a windmill that was worth tilting against. But what we can do is submitted a home rule petition that said, hey, you know, we passed this law. This is how we would like to treat it. So the court in that Boston decision, they specifically said it would take an act of the legislature. So, okay, let's ask the legislature to allow us to do that, because it's one of the things we talked about being the intent of our ordinance. So it may or may not work out, but that was my intent in submitting this.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, this item will be laid on the table for approval and referred to legislative matters.
Item 99 is a resolution issued by Councilor Davis and Councilor McLaughlin that the mayor include in the fiscal year 22 budget funding for full-time staff that report to this council, potentially including a legislative and policy analyst, a public outreach coordinator, and other positions as the council president deems appropriate.
Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Only thing I'll say here is that I chatted with the mayor of this, as I know that you have as well, and perhaps others have, and he agrees that this makes sense. Says he's on board with it. Obviously, there's some details to be worked out, but hopefully that means that we'll in fact see this, and the good work that's being done by the folks who we have hired so far has at least proven that the concept of having the city council having staff can work, and we'll have to figure out the details from there. But I'm optimistic.
All right, any further discussion? Councilor Ballantyne would like to sign on. And I just want to give people a little history story for those of you who were not here a few years ago, that we actually did have an appropriation for council staff before, which was actually voted down by the city council. There's a long story behind that. But in that discussion, we talked about what sort of staffing needs we have. And my thing was, I am not a lawyer. I need a lawyer. And as we've learned over and over again, this is an important need for us specifically as a legislative body to have our own independent counsel. So that's where I'm coming from on this. There might be other considerations to be had, but it's clear we need that. And I'm grateful for the mayor to be willing to have this discussion before the charter committee which is just convened and had their first meeting recently. Hopefully we're going to have some positive motion on things before even the charter committee is finished. But I think this is something that everyone seems to be in agreement on, and I will support it and lay it on the table for approval.
Very good. That brings us up to item number 100, which is an order submitted by Councilor McLaughlin. The Commissioner of Public Works work with Eversource to address the double poles at locations that are described within.
I'd like to thank Councilor Ewan Campen, as well as the Infrastructure Department and Jesse Moose for bringing this up. I saw this on Twitter that the city is now working with Eversource to get rid of a lot of these double poles. I know there's one removed on my street this week. What used to be a Herculean, impossible task is now something that's reality. So that's what I'd like to see. This item's laid on the table for approval.
Number 101 is an order submitted by Council McLaughlin. The Commissioner of Public Works addressed the leaning electrical poles on Glen Street by the East Somerville Community School and also by 48 Flint Street.
This item is laid on the table for approval.
102 is an order submitted by Council McLaughlin. The Director of Parking replaced the down speed limit sign on the Cross Street Bridge by Mr. B's Restaurant.
This item is laid on the table for approval.
That brings us all the way up to item number 104, which is a request to the mayor requesting the adoption of an order of taking for 191 Highland Avenue for municipal, historic, and arts purposes.
This item will be referred to the Finance Committee.
105 is request the mayor question appropriation and authorization to borrow $5,575 in a bond for the cost of acquiring that armory building at 191 Highland Ave.
This item will be referred to the Finance Committee.
106 is a request the mayor question confirmation of the appointment of Denise Molina Capers as Director of Racial and Social Justice.
This item will refer to confirmation of appointments.
107 is communication from the Sustainable Neighborhoods Initiative Coordinator responding to a council item and conveying the Condominium Review Board's fiscal year 20 annual report.
This item will be laid on the table and placed on file.
And item 108 is communication from the National Lawyers Guild, Massachusetts chapter, submitting comments regarding the item that was already approved, the chemical crowd control ordinance.
This item is laid on the table and placed on file.
Mr. President, we have, to my knowledge, 2 late items from city councilors, both you, and 2 other items to review this evening as late items.
Okay, let's start with me.
The first is an order submitted by Councilor McLaughlin and the Director of Engineering, repaint the crosswalk on Garfield Avenue by the Stop and Shop.
That is laid on the table for approval.
Next is an order submitted by Councilor McLaughlin, the Director of Inspectional Services, inspect the property at 117 Washington Street for potential code violations and report the results in writing to the Ward 1 City Councilor.
The only thing I'll say on this is I'm doing this because I haven't gotten a response, and I don't like doing it this way, but I'd like a response. This item's laid on the table and for approval.
We have a request of the mayor requesting approval of a proposed amendment to the zoning ordinances at Article 8.2, which has to do with the small business overlay district, and also amendments to the zoning map.
Interesting. Councilor Davis?
Thank you, Mr. President. This should have been submitted in regular order, which is, my understanding, just got some mix up within the administration in terms of getting it in. So I asked where it was and chased it along. This is the specifically. This is the changes that I've been working on with Dan Bartman to require small spaces. If this is the late item that I'm thinking of, to require small commercial spaces in certain areas and how we overlay those on the maps. Did a lot of math looking at different streets that we have now and kind of came up with a proposal and a way to do it. And so if this could go to the Committee on Land Use, we'll have a deeper conversation.
All right.
And I guess also to find how we would normally dispose of zoning also.
Yep. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, this item referred to Land Use Committee with a copy sent to the Planning Board.
And finally, Mr. President, we have a communication from the mayor conveying the legal memo from the law office that we discussed earlier regarding the chemical crowd control ordinance.
All right, this item is laid on the table and placed on file.
Mr. President, there are no further items before the City Council that I am aware of.
We're going to get done before 10. I can't believe it. We'll take all items that have been laid on the table and do a roll call vote on approval.
Very good, Mr. President. This is a roll call vote on the approval of items 3 through 13, 15 through 24, 26, 28, 38 through 92, 98 through 102, and the 2 late items that you submitted. And in addition, placing on file items 37, 95 and 96, 107 and 108, and the late communication that came in from the mayor.
All right, please call the roll.
On that motion, Councilor Niedergang.
Yes.
Councilor White,
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne,
Yes.
Councilor Ewan Campen,
Yes.
Councilor Davis,
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo,
Yes.
Councilor Klingon,
Yes.
Councilor Mba,
Yes.
Councilor Scott,
Yes.
Councilor Rossetti,
Yes.
and Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. President, all 11 councilors have voted in favor of that motion. All those items have been approved or placed on file respectively.
All right, seeing no items before us, Councilor Baugh moves to adjourn. Please call the roll on adjournment.
This is on adjournment. Councilor Niedergang,
Yes, please.
Councilor White,
Yes.
Councilor Ballantyne,
Yes.
Councilor Ewan Campen,
Yes.
Councilor Davis,
Yes.
Councilor Strezzo,
Yes.
Councilor Klingon,
Yes.
Councilor Mba,
Yes.
Councilor Scott,
Yes, please.
Councilor Rossetti,
Yes.
and Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. President, all 11 councilors have voted in favor of adjourning.
All right, we're adjourned. Good night, everybody. Good job.